There comes a moment in every seeker's life when the mundane begins to fracture, when the clock ticks just a little louder. The world feels slightly offbeat, and patterns you once dismissed as coincidence begin to tug at your awareness like a silent rhythm just beneath the noise. You glance at your phone, and there it is again. 11:11. It waits for you on glowing screens. License plates, receipts, dreams, even the quiet curve of shadows on a wall. And no matter how many times you brush it off, the numbers return persistent, elegant, insistent, like something is knocking, like something is trying to speak. But what if it is not what you've been told? The popular narrative comforting familiar says it's a sign from angels, a wink from the universe, a gentle nudge toward alignment, and that may hold a shard of truth. But this phenomenon, ancient as time itself yet wrapped in modern digital glow, is not merely a spiritual pat on the back. It is a signal, a multidimensional flare flung across the membrane of reality. And not every signal is benign. Not every whisper comes from light. Not every contact is from what we've come to believe as higher. The truth, cloaked in symbols and forgotten lore, runs deeper and darker than most are willing to consider. To understand the presence behind 11:11 is to begin unweaving the very fabric of your reality. For this sequence is not random, and it is not just numerology. It is a trigger-coded temporal key designed to awaken a part of your consciousness that has been dormant. Dormant because it was once too dangerous to remember. You are not just being contacted, you are being activated. But activation can come from many hands, and not all of them are guiding you toward sovereignty. Some are guiding you toward consumption, toward distraction, toward a pseudo-awakening designed to corral your soul into another loop of illusion. This is the deeper danger. Mistaking contact for communion and guidance for entrapment. 11:11 is not a symbol to be feared, but it is one to be respected. It is not inherently good or bad, just as fire is not good or bad. It is a force, a portal, a pressure point in your timeline where the veil thins and unseen eyes observe your readiness. Some believe it's the moment your higher self speaks. Others sense it's a resonance with non-physical intelligence. But beneath those interpretations lies a more primordial truth. 11:11 is a mirror, not a message, but a reflection. What you see when you look into it depends entirely on what sees through you. Why now? Why are more people seeing it than ever before? Because the grid of reality, this tightly wound matrix of time, thought, and frequencies shifting. The old control systems, long hidden behind economics and religion and education, are no longer able to contain the rising current of human remembrance. As this current swells, as collective consciousness approaches a tipping point, ancient mechanisms long buried begin to flicker awake. And 11:11 is one of them. It's not a phenomenon of lightworkers alone. It's part of a universal awakening script embedded deep within the dream of Earth. But who wrote that script, and why? That is the question the surface-level meanings never touch, because this is not just about numbers, it's about attention. The moment you notice the pattern, your energy spikes, your awareness sharpens, your state changes, and in that moment, open, curious, vulnerably you become visible. Your field emits a beacon. You send a pulse across dimensions, and someone answers. But not all beings answering are what they appear. Some arrive with messages of empowerment, others come cloaked in frequencies that mimic light. Speak the language of peace, but weave subtle hooks into your belief systems. It is here, in the softness of unguarded curiosity, that the real contact occurs. This is not meant to frighten, but to clarify. For fear is just the shadow of forgotten discernment, and you are more than equipped to face this threshold. You have seen 11:11 for a reason, and that reason is not random, not algorithmic, not superstition. It is a summons. But a summons can be answered with sovereignty or with submission. The key is in knowing what stands on the other side of that mirrored gate as we journey deeper into the meanings behind this frequency. You will begin to see that it is less of a message to you and more of a message about you. It is not something visiting your awareness, it is something awakening within it. A code you left for yourself before birth. A countdown hidden in time, waiting for you to be ready. Ready not just to follow the light, but to question it. Ready not just to receive guidance, but to claim mastery. ready to understand that the forces behind 1111 are not just celestial, they are archetypal, dimensional, and sometimes even manufactured. You are standing at the edge of a cosmic dialogue that began long before you had a name, and now the numbers call again. But before you step through, ask not just what is calling, but why, and more importantly, who you will become once you answer. To pierce the veil of 1111 is to engage with a set of codes that operate not only outside of language, but outside of time as we commonly experience it. It is a keyhole, narrow and bright, into a larger and older mechanism, one designed not only to awaken, but to direct. These 4 digits, mirroring each other like pillars or portals, carry within them a fusion of ancient structure and modern seduction. But to interpret 1111 simply as a sign from angels or the universe is like mistaking the echo for the voice. To truly understand what's at work behind this sequence, we must step into a new lens, one that views reality not as a fixed backdrop, but as a living feedback system responsive to frequency, awareness, and intention. The first principle buried in the signal of 1111 is that reality is malleable, not metaphorically, but quite literally. It bends to consciousness. What you give your sustained attention to begins to crystallize. Every time you see 1111 and pause whether in curiosity, awe, or even confusion, you open a momentary rift in the normal flow of perception. You stop time, however briefly. That pause is a crack in the matrix. Through that crack, certain intelligences can engage with you not necessarily to help or harm, but to interact. 1111 is a kind of handshake protocol, and in that handshake, something passes between dimensions, sometimes information, sometimes influence. But this is not to say you are passive in the exchange. Quite the opposite. The sequence only becomes significant when you notice it. Without your conscious engagement, it remains just a timestamp. This reveals the second foundational concept. Awareness is the true transmitter. The moment you notice the pattern, your own field activates. You are the antenna. And the intelligence that responds is not separate from you. It is drawn to your frequency like a tuning fork to its resonant tone. Here lies the paradox, though. Because what contacts you in that state may not always reflect your highest truth, may reflect your most dominant belief. That is the great vulnerability in synchronicity. It is neutral. It echoes whatever you project into it. If you believe 1111 is a divine affirmation, it may indeed become that. But if you carry unresolved wounds, unmet desires, or unconscious agreements, then the energies that respond to your awareness may mirror those blind spots instead. That is why discernment is not just helpful, it is essential. For in the arena of symbols, belief becomes a gateway for influence, and not all influences are benign. This brings us to the third core theme. 1111 is both a message and a mirror. What it reveals is shaped by the consciousness that engages with it. This makes it one of the most potent potentially misleading symbols in modern spiritual culture. Many see it as a sign they are on the right path, but this can become a trap. For who defines right? The ego can easily hijack such confirmation, building an identity around being chosen, awakened, or special. And in doing so, it becomes ensnared in a more subtle form of illusion, one where growth is replaced with performance, and humility is traded for spiritual entitlement. The mirror becomes distorted by the very light it reflects. But the fourth, and perhaps most elusive concept within 1111, is that it may not be natural at all. In other words, this phenomenon could be artificially amplified. As human consciousness rises, the systems that once held it in check begin to lose control. In response, new structures are seeded into the collective field symbols, memes, narratives that appear spiritual but are engineered to redirect awakening into manageable channels. It's not that 1111 is inherently deceptive, but that it has been co-opted, like an ancient sigil repurposed for a new agenda. Certain intelligences, whether interdimensional, technocratic, or thought-form standards, stand that numbers are gateways. Repetition opens loops. Attention creates openings. And the mass propagation of these sequences may be less about guidance and more about harvesting energy. This doesn't mean every 1111 sighting is manipulation. Far from it. In truth, there is a genuine, ancient intelligence behind the numbers, a kind of cosmic architect that seeded these codes into the matrix of reality long before the current cycle of history began. These codes were meant to awaken latent memory, stir sacred geometry in the body-mind, and signal a return to galactic consciousness. But like all sacred technology, it can be reversed, inverted, or masked. You must decide which stream of meaning you are tuning into. Are you being nudged forward or being steered into another loop? To navigate this tension, you must begin to use 1111 not just as a sign, but as a checkpoint. Each time it appears, ask yourself, where am I in this moment? What am I thinking? Who might be watching? What beliefs am I carrying that this sign might be mirroring? If you use it consciously, it becomes a tool of empowerment. If you use it blindly, it becomes a feedback loop. You are not just receiving messages, you are shaping them. In this way, 1111 becomes not an end but a doorway, a portal not only into other realms, but into the deepest architecture of your own psyche. It beckons, not as a command, but as an invitation. And like all invitations from the mystery, it must be accepted with reverence, discernment, and a clear understanding of who you are when you look into the mirror of synchronicity. There are truths that can only be revealed through story, not because the facts are unclear, but because the truth lives outside of language, hidden in the folds of metaphor and myth. The human psyche, woven from the same cosmic fabric as stars and dreams, speaks in symbols. It remembers through archetypes. So to truly understand 1111, we must step outside the sterile corridors of logic and enter the living theater of allegory. Only then does the real message unfold, not as instruction, but as initiation picture, if you will, an ancient gate. Twin pillars rise from a barren desert, casting long shadows across the sands. One pillar reflects light, smooth and gleaming, while the other absorbs it, dark and silent. Between them is nothing, an empty space, vibrating faintly like the moment just before a breath. The gate bears no inscription, no symbol, only the repeated form of itself. 1111. Carved not in stone, but in rhythm. A traveler approaches, weary from wandering. They do not know what draws them to this place, only that something ancient stirs within them every time the numbers return. They've seen it in reflections, in clocks, in the strange alignments of events they once dismissed. Now, standing between the pillars, they realize the truth. They were never seeing 1111 on the outside. They were being shown what was already encoded inside. The traveler hesitates. They sense that crossing through the gate will change them, not because something waits on the other side, but because something will be revealed. This is the first lesson of 1111 in symbolic form. It is not a door you pass through, it is a threshold you become. The numbers mirror your own spiritual DNA, your inner polarity, your split between higher self and conditioned self, between presence and programming. The gate is you, waiting for you to remember in another tale. Long whispered in the shadow temples of forgotten civilizations, there is a story of a machine, not one of gears and metal, but one of frequency. It was built not on Earth, but seeded into Earth's dreamscape. This machine, made of recurring numbers and sacred geometries, was designed to awaken the sleeping. But over time, a faction of beings, neither gods nor demons, but something in between, discovered how to reap the machine. They learned that if they could attach belief systems to the sequences, they could guide the awakening process, not towards sovereignty, but towards subtle servitude. The numbers still carried light, but they also carried suggestion. The people, hungry for meaning, consumed the signs without questioning the source. And in doing so, they accepted an architecture that was not theirs. This story may sound fantastical, but it speaks to the reality of influence, not in the realm of politics or propaganda, but in the metaphysical bandwidth where symbols carry more weight than laws. The sequence, 1111, in this symbolic telling, is both the ancient machine and the modern trap. Whether it liberates or ensnares depends not on the numbers, but on the state in which they are received. It is not a message you receive, it is a test you participate in. Yet not all symbolic tales warn, some offer deeper comfort. In one vision passed through dreamkeepers and oracles, there is the story of the celestial mirror. This mirror floats in the space between dimensions, reflecting only what is real, but it does not show your face or your body. It shows your alignment, your resonance. And every time a soul crosses a certain frequency of self-awareness, the mirror flashes a pulse for vertical rays, twin dualities, balanced and awake. 1111. The soul sees it not with eyes, but with inner knowing. It begins to appear in waking life, not because the universe sends it, but because the soul now resonates with it. The mirror doesn't call you, call the mirror, and the appearance of 1111 is simply your own light, echoing back on in this view. 1111 becomes a sacred echo, a harmony point between the seen and unseen. It may still serve as a contact point, but not with something outside you. Rather, it is contact with a deeper layer within you, one that exists outside of time, watching and waiting for the human self to reach its signal. In this telling, the sequence is a breadcrumb trail laid out by your higher self, a reminder that you are not lost, even when you feel you are. But to follow the breadcrumbs is not to retreat into mysticism, is to walk into deeper responsibility, for now the map is visible, and the excuses no longer apply. All symbolic systems point to a choice. Every myth about 1111, every vision, every pattern, offers a moment where the observer must choose, wake further, or fall back into the dream. And the numbers will keep appearing, not as commandment, but as compass. When you're aligned, they affirm. When you're lost, they alert. But they are never passive. They are alive, coded with consciousness, carrying the weight of whatever you place upon them. That is the real secret. Not that you are being contacted, but that you are the contact point. You are the doorway. You are the myth becoming conscious of itself and 1111. It's not a signal from elsewhere. It's the sound your soul makes when it's ready to begin remembering the script it wrote before the illusion began. To witness a symbol is one thing. To live at that is the true path of transformation. All the myth, all the mystery surrounding 1111 becomes hollow if it never moves from the realm of awe into the rhythm of action. Symbols are only powerful when they alter the way we move through the world. Otherwise, they remain floating above us sacred, yes, but inert. And so we ask, how does this code, this mirror, this portal 1111 change the way we live? First, it teaches us to pay attention. This cannot be overstated. The essence of 1111 is not just that it appears, but when it appears often in liminal spaces, in pauses between decisions, in moments of questioning, despair, or deep longing, these are the interstitial places in your psyche, the thresholds between the known and the unknown. When you begin to take the appearance of 1111 seriously, not superstitiously, but attentively, you begin to rewire your relationship with presence. You start noticing the pauses between your thoughts. You become curious about what you were just thinking, feeling, or resisting. The number becomes an inner bell, ringing you awake inside the dream. This awareness births a new kind of sovereignty. You no longer move through life as a passive receiver of reality. You begin to read your life the way a mystic reads the sky, or a shaman reads the fire. Everything has meaning, not in a way that overwhelms, but in a way that reveals. Seeing. 1111 stops being a cute spiritual moment and becomes a checkpoint of alignment. When it appears, ask, what am I consenting to in this moment? What am I believing? What frequency am I emitting? What hidden agreement might I be unconsciously renewing? The number becomes your soul's silent nudge toward greater self-honesty. If you are trapped in a loopy, emotional, relational, behavior 1111 will begin to show up at key junctions, not as a reward, but as an opportunity. The universe, through your own higher self, is holding up a mirror and asking, are you ready? To choose differently, this extends into relationships. The people who appear around these moments are not accidental. If you've ever noticed the number just before or after speaking with someone, encountering a stranger, or rekindling an old connection, pay attention. 1111 often frames soul contracts, agreements made before this life that are now activating. These may not be long-lasting relationships. Some may be brief, catalytic, or even challenging. But they carry encoded lessons. When you honor them, the lessons integrate. When you resist or repeat old patterns, the symbol continues to reappear sometimes, more frequently, like an insistent knock growing louder. In practical terms, this demands an evolution of discernment. You may begin to pull away from paths that once felt certain. You might change your environment, relationships, work, or routines. The false layers begin to itch. You feel called to clear physical and psychic clutter. Minimalism, grounding, and nature start to nourish you in ways distraction never could. This isn't just personal preference. Your entire nervous system is recalibrating to perceive subtle signals, and in doing so, rejecting the artificial noise. Even technology begins to shift in meaning. Many experience 11:11 through digital clocks, devices, and online timestamps. But what if this is not incidental? What if part of your awakening includes becoming aware of how consciousness interacts with the digital realm? You begin to realize that your interaction with screens is not just passive, it is relational. The devices respond to your state. The timing of notifications, glitches, appearances of synchronicities through media, these are not always random. They may be symptomatic of your expanded field. Consciousness and technology, once seen as opposites, now begin to dance. But only if you engage from the center of your own awareness, not from conditioned reflexes, and perhaps most importantly, 11:11 invites integration over interpretation. It does not ask you to figure it out, but to embody what it means. Every time it shows up, you are given a choice. Will you continue from the mind or move from the soul? Will you allow that moment to become sacred? Will you pause? Will you breathe? Will you respond to life as though it were speaking to you through symbols? Because it is. This means living symbolically. This means seeing your emotions, not as failures or moods, but as messages. This means approaching daily tasks, not as chores, but as rituals of remembrance. Washing the dishes becomes cleansing old stories. Walking becomes a pilgrimage. Making art becomes decoding the soul's language. You stop separating the spiritual from the practical. The numbers no longer need to shock you. Their work is done when your entire life begins to move with the rhythm they represent. This also means recognizing when the symbol fades. Sometimes, when you've truly integrated what you need to, the numbers stop appearing. This is not abandonment. This is evolution. The teacher disappears when the student becomes the teaching. If 11:11 no longer haunts your clocks, it may be because you are now living its frequency, not just seeing it. The pattern has moved from outer reality into your inner coherence, but you will know when the contact deepens. The signs become more subtle, the invitations more personal. A dream, a whisper, a knowing, and that's when you realize 11:11 was never just a number. It was never just a message. It was a mirror reflecting your emergence, your return, your remembrance of the light you carry. The light that once shattered across time, now gathering itself in full. The final echo of 11:11 does not fade with the ticking of a clock. It does not vanish when your eyes leave the screen or your thoughts drift elsewhere. It lingers beneath the surface, behind your breath, within the folds of consciousness. A memory you never quite lived and yet have always carried. Because it isn't just a sign you are seeing, it's a state you are entering. You've walked through symbols and mirrors, questioned the story you were told, peeled back layers of manufactured meaning to stand before the raw and luminous architecture of your own awakening. What began as a number, almost laughably simple in its repetition, has unfurled into a living thread connecting you to something vast and ancient, something both cosmic and cellular. Now the question is no longer why. Am I seeing 11:11? The question becomes, who am I becoming in response to it? This number has not been chasing you. It has been reflecting you, reflecting your readiness, your resonance, your realignment with something that existed before the identity you wear and will remain long after it dissolves. And now that you've followed it through the winding halls of myth, truth, distortion, and potential, now that you've felt its pulse beat, not just in time, but in truth, you are no longer a seeker. You are an integrator of what you've remembered. The contact was never with angels or aliens alone. It was never only from gods or guides or galactic architects. The contact was from you to you, a pre-incarnational echo, a soul-sent signal flung across the illusion of forgetting, encoded into this patterned world so that, when the time came, you would remember. And here you are. You have answered. You are awake not to the fantasy of being chosen, but to the responsibility of choosing. And what will you choose? To live numbly in reaction, or to become the response? To see symbols and ask for more, signs, or to become the sign, to wait for destiny, or to sculpt it, moment by sacred moment. Because 1111 was never meant to stop you in your tracks. It was meant to quicken your steps. It is not a destination. It is a departure point, an inner launchpad from which the rest of your work begins. Now is the time to live with intention. Not borrowed intention, not an influencer's mantra or a book's affirmation, but the clarity that arises when your soul steps forward into the light and says, "This is why I came." You are not just here to decode signs. You are here to become the living frequency that once sent them. Let the world call it coincidence. Let the rational mind dismiss it. You now know the difference between an external pattern and an internal pulse. You now recognize the sensation not of being told something, but of waking up to something you've always known. And when 1111 appears again, and it will, let it not just be a moment of curiosity. Let it be a bow, a breath, a bell of remembrance. Because this is your initiation. This is your return. And the numbers will fade only when you've become what they meant to awaken. So go. Move forward, not as someone who sees signs, but as someone who is a signal. Someone who carries a field of coherence so precise, so attuned, so sovereign, that you no longer seek external proof. You are the proof. You are the prophecy fulfilling itself. The secret was never hidden in the numbers. The secret was hidden in you. And now, the code is complete. Now the contact becomes creation. Now the mirror becomes a window.